So today we're talking about planting a Whitethorn hedge, and there's many advantages to planting a Whitethorn hedge. So it's a very, what we call a stock-proof hedge. So in other words, it keeps animals within the field. So it's a stock-proof hedge, but it also has massive biodiversity benefits. So it's very good for all types of pollinator insects. It's very good for birds, particularly songbirds. It's good for moths, butterflies, wasps, bees. It has many. It's a true habitat-rich hedge, and it's an integral part of the Irish landscape. So it can be a standalone specimen as a bush in a garden or in a field or wherever. But what we will be dealing with today is we'll be dealing with it as a hedge and as a stock-proof barrier, and also for biodiversity. Basically, you can have any soil type and it will suit a Whitethorn hedge. So that's a bit unusual, because with some other plants you'd end up having to have a particular type of soil type or a certain pH. But the Whitethorn hedge has the ability to adapt and modify and bring the soil around to the best conditions possible for it. So you can have it growing in really marginal land. You can have it growing in very, very fertile land. You can have it growing in land where there's an issue with drainage, and you can have it growing in free draining land. And it can grow on a mountain, exposed, or it can grow by the sea. So it's very, very versatile as a plant. If you're not quite ready to plant, or if you purchase early in the dormant season, it's very prudent to heel them in. So basically you make a trench, you heel them in at 45-degree angle, and that's your cold store, we call it, outdoors. I dug my little trench, I put in my plants, and my plants are sitting there since roots are still moist. Soil is attached to the roots, and they're sitting there since October, November, whenever they were available. So they've been sitting there for that period of time. Ironically, I'll just tell you horticulturally, if I had planted them when they came, say they came early December, I think, and I had planted them in earlier December, we got a lot of rain and a lot of wind, and they'd be over there rocking around. They'd be okay. But the fact that we're going to plant them today and the sap is rising, I'll have better hedge. I'll have better establishment, and I'll have a much better product, and I'll have no failures by actually healing them in and waiting until the bud is about to burst and then boom into the ground. That is with all deciduous plants, you know. So much better than they staying in a bag in the shed. They're better off in living soil, or they could even be in a gravel pit, and you heel them in and you leave them there until you're ready to planting. So then you come along and you pick your site. Now the site, they can run north-south, they can run east-west, but the important thing about the site on the day that you're planting is that it's not waterlogged. So if there's an issue that the site is waterlogged, well then you need to divert the water or get it away from the roots of the plant sitting in wet ground, sitting in water, because they will not thrive if they sit with their feet wet, with their roots wet. Once you've sorted that you don't have basically a water table too high, or the water is sitting up around the plants, you proceed to dig a trench. And this trench, depending on the length of the trench, it can be dug by hand or it can be done with a digger. So the trench is typically 2 shovels wide and 1 shovel deep. That is the typical width of a trench that you dig. But what you have to do is you have to look at the plants that you have purchased, and you have to match the trench to the roots of the plant. So you do not want to compact the roots, because if the roots are compacted, subsequently they will develop disease. So it's very important that the roots have enough room to breathe when you plant them in the trench. So I decided on my width, and I put down my 2 strings. So no guesswork, no weaving. So no weaving left or right, because when we put this on afterwards, it's in our interest to be reasonably straight. Otherwise, we're going to be short of it at one place or another. And even if I had a guy here with a digger, I'd put down my line before he comes, and I'd mark it out with 2 lines of lime, and I'd say to him, stay on track, you know, don't weave, because you'll make my life harder. So having picked your site, having got your trench, you come along, you dig your trench, and basically when you dig your trench, what you do is you put the sod, presuming you're digging into a grass field, you put the sod to one side, to your left for instance, and then the fresh earth that you dig from the trench, you put it to your right. Both of these will be going back into the trench, but you very systematically put the sod to one side, bare earth to the other, leaving enough room to work. The next step in the process is that you come along and you get your sod, and upside down you put it in the base of the trench. The advantage of this is that this sod contains very beneficial biology to inoculate your hedge. It also contains fertility, so it's a very valuable use of the parent material of the sod. So you put the sod in upside down, you put it upside down so as it does not regrow and present itself as a grass weed to your hedge in the first year. So you put your sod upside down, and coming from an organic perspective, I recommend that you put a light forkful of a continuous layer of farmyard manure into the trench. Now it could be fresh farmyard manure, or it could be composted farmyard manure, aged farmyard manure. You break up your manure well, you avoid it being smeared, being compacted, and you put it into the trench. And on top of the farmyard manure, you put a light buffer of soil. So you just put a sprinkle of soil so as the roots are not directly in contact with the farmyard manure and end up scorching the roots. So you put a light layer of soil on top, and then you get your plant, your quick. And basically what we're aiming to do is we're aiming to put the plants in a single row, 30 centimeters apart. Single row, 30 centimeters apart, to suit our method of putting on the fabric. So some other groups or people that would be advising you would give you a double row. There is nothing wrong with that. It's just that the single row suits our particular method and the weed block membrane that we're going to put on. So one person holds the plant and visualizes how the root you want the root to be in 15 years time. So there's no point sticking it in like that. So think, okay, I want this to web out, because that way it has anchorage and that way it gets nutrients, and kind of the plant will present itself. Now not every root is perfect, but you see the plant will present itself, and you get your plant, and without thinking about it too much, you kind of think, okay, where am I going to put that? What am I going to do? So then you might think, okay, so you have a helper with the fork or with the shovel, and you just very quickly do so avoid breaking the roots, but you kind of weave them a little bit quickly, and then with your planter you hold the plant, and the shovel person or the fork person then very gently put soil in here and then put soil around, and they kind of complete the task in three or four little movements, not one big plop and turning this. So you're mindful that your root is nice, that your plant is straight, and then you direct your helper and say, okay, give me soil there. And then you say, give me some here, give me some there. And then you arrange it. And once you have it secured, you move on to the next plant. The key at all times is to avoid compaction, because compacted soil, smeared soil, will grow perennial weeds such as scotch grass and bindweed. So avoid compaction, backfill nice and loose with your earth. So you've backfilled it and you make a nice, what we call a seed bed. So you make it nice and even, nice and uniform, ensuring that all the roots are covered. So once you have your plant in place, you come along, and quite a drastic step now is that you have a very sharp secateurs, and at the height of a biro from the soil, so about 10-12 inches of a height of a stem, you cut above a bud at a 45-degree angle. If you cut above the bud at a 45-degree angle, the plant has the ability to secrete a juice and seal itself, and you won't get what's called dieback, which is a disease. It automatically produces a glue-like substance and it seals perfectly, and then the rain falls off. Whereas if you cut it straight across any old way, which I've just done between the buds, this'll rot. You cut off all the top growth. So what you're left with is just this twig sticking up, a strong twig that looks like a biro or a pencil. So you removed all the top growth, because what you're doing is you're principally buying root when you buy strong plants and you buy quicks. The plant will subsequently sprout and fill in, and it will make as much progress as if you left the top growth. Then you come along, you get your black mulch fabric. It's a very particular type of fabric. It's cheap and cheerful. Sometimes it's called Covertan 52. You can buy it in garden shops, and it's quite cheap, light fabric. And what you do is you spread that out and you put it on, make a snip in it with the secateurs, and you put it on over the cutting quite snug, so you don't upset the plant, but you make a snip in the fabric, and then you get the fabric down over the cutting, the plant of the whitethorn. You put it down nice and carefully, and then you put a bead of gravel on the outside of the fabric in order to keep it weighed down. So you avoid putting gravel on the entire amount of fabric, because that will compact the bed. You need air, so you put a bead of gravel along both edges in order to weigh it down. And alternatively then you put in some stone just to keep it from rising up the fabric. The benefit of this type of fabric, it's a very light fabric, is that it will ripple with the wind. It will let in some water, and also it heats the soil. And what we want is we want the soil, the bed that we've planted the whitethorn into, we want it to become a compost heap. We want it to become highly fertile, full of earthworms, and basically the hedge then very quickly, if you plant around St. Bridget's Day, within a fortnight you'll begin to see the hedge budding and beginning to throw out leaf, and basically you have your hedge established. There should be 100% take. There should be no failure using this method. So it's a very simple method, it's a thorough method, and the objective is that you get a very strong, healthy, thick hedge with very little weed competition.